If you released a video game in the hazy days of the 90s, it was a legal requirement to have a lovable mascot themed around some sort of wacky animal. Earthworms, Jim's got you covered. Geckos, say hello to Gex. Dizzy Egg, not really an animal, but this ovoid's contribution to nutritional awareness deserves a mention. Look, the point is, 90s video games represented exotic beasties like never before, and were probably responsible for us learning way more about wildlife than our science teachers could ever have taught us. Sorry, Mr. Clydesdale, but is it that difficult to turn up sober just once in a while? And of course, one of the greatest animal mascots of the era took the marsupial form of a Crash, a box-hating, wumper-munching species indigenous to the regions of, Oh, sorry, it's a bandicoot. Okay. This manic bandicoot, am I saying that right, introduced millions of us to 3D platformers for the very first time, and his 1996 debut gave the PlayStation just the kind of plumber-punting, hedgehog-stomping clout it needed to become one of the most successful consoles of all time. With the Bandy Dudes 2017 remake and Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled power sliding into our lives right now, it's clear to us there's plenty more Crash left to Bandicoot. Best we brush up on our knowledge of obscure Australian creatures then, I suppose. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 things you didn't know about Crash Bandicoot. Number 10. WILLIE the Wombat. The humble Bandicoot, I'm talking about the real-life animal now, owes a huge debt to Crash. Once upon a time, this unassuming marsupial was wallowing in the depths of obscurity, condemned to small-time pub gigs doing shrew tribute acts. But when Crash exploded onto the scene in 1996, Bandicoots across the world became overnight superstars. However, it could have been a whole lot different. It could have been this guy! That's a wombat, by the way. Inspired by the Looney Tunes Tasmanian Devil, Naughty Dog founders Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin wanted to create an equally unusual marsupial character, and initially planned for a wombat called WILLIE. Also considered was a potteroo, which is, I mean, this is what Google says a potteroo is, but it could just be a weird mouse for all we know. When publisher Universal Interactive Studios insisted on the wombat angle, however, with the names Wuzzle, Wez, or Wezzy in order to appeal to da youths, Naughty Dog thankfully opposed, even threatening to stop development altogether. Good job too, otherwise certain Crash fans wouldn't have played the game, grown up to become scientists, and then named an actual extinct species of bandicoot Crash. Nice one, science. Number 9. Dynamic difficulty. Kids these days, they don't know they're born. What with all their high-tech YouTube walkthroughs and game facts guides, they won't last 5 minutes in the Wumper-Eat-Wumper world of the original Crash. These games were tough, so tough that sometimes you'd have to ask an older sibling to help you get through the level. Thank you. That said though, Naughty Dog did actually do their best to offer a helping hand to the struggling 90s player. Sure, the original Crash was pretty tricky, especially on slippery climb with those irregular checkpoints and horrid moving platforms. God, keep still. Why would there be moving platforms on a castle wall? What vicious hellscape is this? But it's not all marsupial masochism here. In a fairly cutting-edge move for late 90s gaming, Naughty Dog took note and implemented a so-called dynamic difficulty adjustment for the sequels. Speaking in 2011, Jason Rubin said, "We'd realised that if a novice player died a lot of times, we could give them an Aku at the start of a round and they had a better chance to progress. If you died a lot when running from the boulder, we could slow the boulder down a little each time. If you died too much, a regular fruit crate would suddenly become a checkpoint crate." Eventually, everyone succeeded at Crash. Good player, bad player, everyone loved the Crash games. They never realised it's because they were all playing a slightly different game, balanced for their specific needs. Oh, God, they don't make developers like this anymore. Bring back Naughty Dog. Oh, actually, they're doing pretty well. Number 8, Sonic's ass game. Oh yeah, you work it, Crash. Shake that money maker. Is not what you should be saying, out of respect for a platforming hero who has a lot more about him than just his body, you perverts. The unique behind the character perspective for the game was unlike all side-scrolling mascot platformers of the time, which led to the aptly named Naughty Dog, giving it the working title of Sonic's ass game. Trust me, do not Google that. Consciously Regardless of this though, the creators mixed it up a bit with some more traditional side-scrolly bits and the infamous Indiana Jones boulder sections, where Crash really broke all the video game rules of the time and ran towards the camera. And just as well, really, the artists had worked exceptionally hard to design a character that had, well, character, thanks to his full facial features and goofy grin. But without levels like Boulder Dash, we wouldn't really have seen very much of Crash's witless mug, which would have been a terrible shame. However, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and so graphical limitations and the smaller, fuzzier TVs of the time meant sacrificing Crash's neck in order to afford enough facial free real estate. But hey, it's a worthy trade-off. Ah, who's a cheeky chappy who just decimated the indigenous wildlife of a delicate ecosystem? Yeah, you are. You are. Number 7, Crash can speak, but he shouldn't. Leonardo da Vinci once said, "Silence is a great source of strength." But what would he know? He invented the helicopter, and they don't exactly lend themselves to peace and quiet, do they? Can you even hear me? Silence being a virtue is certainly true of most classic video game mascots, with many of them conveying their thoughts with only a curt or the occasional. And things are no different with Crash Bandicoot. Apart from the odd guttural exclamation, "Whoa!" the marsupial remained remarkably quiet throughout his original Naughty Dog run, only really breaking his vow of silence in the opening cutscene of the very first game, after smashing through a window to fall several stories into the ocean. And even that apparently only warranted the words, "Uh-oh!" This was an intentional choice, however, explained by co-creator and two first names haver, Andy Gavin. The character should be goofy but never talk, he said, because voices for game characters at the time were always, quote, lame, negative, and distracted from identification with them. And having heard several of Crash's post-Naughty Dog utterances, we'd have to agree. We can almost forgive the excited cry of "Pancakes!" at the end of Crash of the Titans, because we all feel the same way about pancakes, let's face it. But we absolutely cannot forgive this out-of-character nonsense in the franchise that shall not be named.
Oh, cool! That thing's Richie Ditch!
And there was also this ad for Crash 2, where I'm pretty sure they literally just asked a guy to pop a bit of speed and then improv whatever bollocks he wanted to in a recording booth for 60 seconds.
Oh, thank you very much, baby. Thank you very much. That was funny stuff. Wow, funny stuff. Doc, did you see that?
God, this might be the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone in human history.
I just flew in from the New Ruins level, and boy, are my arms tired.
Okay, that's enough now. Number 6, TAWNA Bandicoot is Pamela Anderson. While I'm sure Crash initially attempted to woo the real Pamela Anderson, but doubtless had issues with his chat-up lines,
I am not an animal. I am Crash Bandicoot.
In 1996, he settled for a more polygonal digital alternative. But it's true, the design of Crash's Bandicoot girlfriend TAWNA was originally based on Pamela Anderson herself. It's perhaps not a surprise then that TAWNA was removed in the sequels due to being too overtly sexualized, according to Universal. Still, we know he brushed up on his speech between Crash 1 and 2, so we could always have another go at chatting up the real Pamela.
And now, I have to do it again.
Oh no, never mind. Number 5, citation needed. Nowadays, it's unthinkable that after months of 18-hour working days, a dev team might discover that the end product doesn't even have their name on it. But this almost happened at E3 1996 for Crash's big debut. We're back with another Jason Rubin quote for this one, who states there was a continuing attempt by Universal to take credit for the product. Apparently, on early box covers and press materials for E3, Naughty Dog's logo had mysteriously disappeared. So, in response, Rubin printed 1,000 copies of a document titled Naughty Dog, creator and developer of Crash Bandicoot, to hand out at the Crash display, and was even thoughtful enough to pass some of them on to the Universal reps too, which is brilliant. Rubin states the head of Universal came as close to literally flipping his lid as a person can come. Luckily though, Crash's immense popularity spoke for itself, and Naughty Dog continue a stellar track record to this very day. Number 4, the Japanese serial killer reference. Despite Crash's aforementioned flagrant disregard for the local animal population of the WOMBAT archipelago, it's a bit of a stretch to compare him to an actual real-life serial killer. However, when the people at Sony Japan reviewed Crash Bandicoot 2, there was an unfortunate moment in their playthrough in which he inadvertently looked all too like one of the victims of Tsutomu Miyazaki, a killer still loose at the time. The crushing death animation, where where Crash gets comically squashed by an environmental hazard or enemy and waddles around with feet sticking out of his flat head and dead man's crosses in his eyes, was said to have been reminiscent for the killer's MO, thanks to his penchant for leaving his victims' severed heads next to their shoes. Pretty gruesome, and not at all in keeping with Crash's light, whimsical theme. Universal and Naughty Dog clearly took this comparison seriously enough, as the animation was changed as a result in the Eastern release of the game. Probably a wise move, because Crash wound up being hugely popular in Japan, which was a rare feat for a Western video game mascot at the time. And this wasn't the only change made to appeal to the Japanese fanbase either, as we'll find out soon enough. But first, number 3, Crash's mad ads. Most of the time, marketing teams are pretty terrible at promoting games. Ill-conceived PR stunts, bizarre promotional events, and truly haunting adverts are the order for the day for boardroom suits who simply can't figure out how to reach this elusive gaming audience. How about make a good game and then just show it to us? No, cried Universal staunchly. People want to see a man in a Crash costume with a big face hole driving around town with a vendetta against a certain plumber boy and harassing people with a megaphone on their front lawn.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man.
I've always thought these ads were a bit weird. I don't understand why there's a face hole. Why is it not just a man in a full Crash suit? Why do we see his face? I don't understand why his face is out. And although I think it was a masterstroke to leave fake calling cards in phone boxes across London's Soho district advertising a randy young Bandicoot's after-hours services, it probably wasn't that effective for a game aimed mainly at a younger demographic, now was it? Sometimes though, ad campaigns are so wild that they can even permeate the game development process itself. Naughty Dog were so awestruck by this absurd Japanese advert for the first title that they decided to include the dance routine in Crash 2 and 3. So there you go, now you know where the dance comes from. Oh, top drawer Crash trivia right there. Number 2, Japan's CURVY Crash. Japan just keeps cropping up in this list, as does Crash's appearance. Leave the poor boy alone. He's beautiful in his own unique way. Sadly, the Japanese audience didn't actually agree with that when the game was first being developed in 1996, unconvinced as they were by his angular features, more typical of Western character art. So, Naughty Dog took every measure possible to make their beloved Bandicoot a star in Japan, which over the years meant some rather drastic facial reconstruction. How very Hollywood. Though the Crash on the first game's box art was still fairly representative of the in-game model, the subsequent game covers brought us a short, squat Bandicoot with softer, more rounded edges and large eyes with less attitude than his Western counterpart. Oh, and those brows, man. Are people still saying on fleek? Because they're on fleek. Is that... I feel so old. This almost anime-style makeover clearly worked a treat for Japanese gamers, and while these changes only extended to the cover art as opposed to the in-game model, there was a code to unlock a so-called Japanese Crash skin in 2005's Crash Tag Team Racing. Possible Nitro-Fueled skin, anyone? And number 1, Crash's cartoon intro.
Crash Bandicoot should have been a genius, but he doesn't quite compute.
This is one of my favourite pieces of cutting room floor material from any gaming franchise. In what is surely the most lamentable missed opportunity of the original PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot's intro FMV was initially done in the style of a Saturday morning cartoon series. Sadly though, it was ditched at the 11th hour by Sony Computer Entertainment, who were really pushing for 3D graphics throughout to show off the console's capabilities. And more regretful still is the notion that if this had made it to the final cut, then you know an actual cartoon series would have eventually followed. So thanks for ruining our childhood with a lack of Crash cartoons, PlayStation. This glorious animation had plenty of similarities with what became the main intro cinematic, including Cortex's laboratory, the escape of Crash out of the window, and the detainment of TAWNA. There's even a short ending cutscene animated in the same style, although in this version, rather than the happy couple flying off into the sunset on top of the blimp, Cortex activates a remote detonation, presumably killing Crash and TAWNA instantly. I don't like it, it's all a bit Hindenburg for me. Perhaps the most fascinating detail about this clip for the long-time Crash fans amongst you is that in one shot we can actually see Tiny Tiger and the Komodo Bros hanging out in Cortex's lab, despite the fact that they didn't ultimately appear in-game until Crash 2. Evidently, they were planned ahead of time. Now don't say we never teach you anything. And that's our list, but let us know any Crash facts that we may have missed in the comments below. You can follow myself and TripleJump on Twitter here, and if you want to support the things you enjoy, then check out the rewards on our Patreon. Finally, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I've been Peter from TripleJump, and thanks for watching.